Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Echo Worm Live. Today we'll be going through all the questions that you guys have left on the channel, whether it be about the channel and the future of what we're going to talk about and read on the channel, or whether it be questions that you guys have about the books that we cover, whether it be Percy Jackson or Harry Potter or Hunger Games or anything of the sort. All of your questions, feel free to ask them in the comments section below. Or in the live chat. We'll try to get to all the ones in the live chat that we can. We typically do this every other Thursday, so the next one, if I do my math correctly, let's shoot for November 7th. I believe that's 2 Thursdays from today, around about that 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock Eastern time. Today's a little earlier than we usually do, just for some personal reasons. I had to get this out of the way earlier in my evening, but this also gives the opportunity for people on the East Coast or even across in Europe to kind of get this before they go to bed. I know it's maybe less of a convenience for those on the West Coast of the United States, but if you're here, thank you for being here. Very much appreciate it. Feel free to ask those questions in the chat, like I said, and we will try to get to all of them. But first question I have today, there's a bunch of them that we kind of have every week. And there are two separate questions here that a lot of people have asked. And the first one comes from Greekus and Solangelo, who both say, can you please do Magnus Chase, or do you plan on doing any Magnus Chase? I will combine that with the following question asked by Asmodeus, who says, will you do Trials of Apollo? Jenna Davis, who says, can you do Trials of Apollo next, please? Mars1670, who says, please give us Trials of Apollo. Trombone, who says, can you do the Trials of Apollo next? So the easy answer is yes, I will do both of them. Trials of Apollo is currently airing over on Patreon. So if you guys want to or have the capability of becoming members on Patreon, feel free to do so. It's there was a link earlier on the screen that said patreon.com/echoworm. Of course, worm spelled with an I. You can go there, and every day at about 10 o'clock in the morning Central Time, a chapter of Trials of Apollo is dropping. I think we're at like chapter 22 or so at the moment. So if you guys want Trials of Apollo, that's where it's available now. It should reach the regular channel. I want to say it should be up on the channel in December. Like December 13th is when it starts airing. I'm going to switch my lighting real quick here. Just a little bright for my liking. There we go. Okay. But then Trials of Apollo, after that, we will do Magnus Chase. So there's 5 books in the Trials of Apollo series. We will do those starting on the channel in December. Of course, we're going to get through the Kane Chronicles first. After Kane Chronicles, then we will do Trials of Apollo. And after Trials of Apollo, then we will do Magnus Chase. So Magnus Chase should hit the channel about April. But Trials of Apollo will be starting in December. We're almost done with the first of the Kane Chronicles books on the channel. The Red Pyramid should, the full form, be up on the Echo Worm channel on 3 days from today, I believe. So Saturday, if not Sunday. Question from Senor Reaper, who says, your accents are awesome, especially for Artemis. Artemis Fowl, I'm assuming you're talking about. Have you ever thought about reading the Michael Vey series? I haven't. I know about it. You're the first person to suggest it, so I'll add it to my list. Michael Vey is very similar in concept to a book that I've read on the channel, kind of, called The Gardener. So if you go to they're very different in terms of the series, but the original concept of the breakout and the secret organization kind of thing that I know about of Michael Vey. I've never actually read the series, but I know kind of the premise of the first book. It's very similar to a book called The Gardener. So if you go to the playlist titled YA Singles, or Young Adult Single Novels on the channel, you should be able to find a book called The Gardener. I believe it's by S.A. Bodine. It was one of the first like individual books that I read on the channel. So you can check that out if you're interested. Otherwise, I'll add the Michael Vey series to my list. The list is fairly extensive at the moment. Obviously, you see the books behind me, over my shoulder. This side of things is my have already read in this cycle of getting to it, and on this side is have not yet read in this cycle of getting to it books. I do like a chapter at a time when I can of the books behind me. Of course, you see Sherlock Holmes, Aragon, Dune Messiah, which is the second of the Dune. We'll talk about Dune Messiah. Obviously, you see the thumbnail that I have on this week's live stream. But then I have Mockingjay because I'm almost done recording Catching Fire for my patrons. Above that, some more Magic Treehouse stuff. Over my other shoulder, you have House of Cards, The Sun and the Star, some of the Avatar novels, Divergent, Maze Runner, Artemis Fowl 2, more of the Missing series, The Phantom Tollbooth I haven't read yet, more Diary of a Wimpy Kid, that sort of thing is over on that side of thing. And then in front of me, you guys can't see it, is my immediate read pile. So this is, I try to get to a chapter of all of these every day. This includes the fifth of the Among the Hidden series, the Shadow Children books. Among the Brave, I said 2 weeks ago that I was going to try to get it to you guys in 2 weeks, and then I decided to do Goosebumps first. So Goosebumps is coming out next Wednesday. You guys have been asking for Goosebumps for a long time. I wanted to give you that prior to Halloween. So that took up my time that I should have been spending on Among the Brave. Among the Brave, hopefully 2 weeks from today, you'll see that at least coming out soon on the channel. I'm also going to read Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. That is a book. It's nowhere near similar to the film, so don't get your hopes up for a film novelization. Then Trials of Apollo, Hunger Games Catching Fire, which, like I said, we're about 2/3 of the way through over on Patreon. Tale of Despero, if you guys have ever read that. Game of Thrones, we're about 2/3 of the way through that as well. And then Fire and Blood. But those are all the ones I am working on kind of immediately. SJ De Taco Bomb says, I was thinking about asking you to do Dune. I've already done Dune. So if you want the first book of the Dune series, which is what the first 2 movies are based on, I have them in 3 separate parts, just kind of going through the 3 big sections of Dune. And then I just started Dune Messiah. Dune Messiah is the only other book in the Dune series that I've promised to read. Dune is a very hard series to narrate, as I've found, and it's not a very fun one. As much as I love the Dune series, it's not a very fun book to narrate because of a lot of big words, a lot of made-up words, a lot of characters talking back and forth, and the thought processes between the POVs going back and forth. But Dune Messiah, they just greenlit the movie. So this is the 3rd Dune movie based on the 2nd Dune book. And I believe they have given kind of a preliminary release date of Christmas 2026. So I will have the audiobook done well before that. I'm hoping to have it done in February, up on the channel in full sometime in February or early March. And then, obviously, you can read it anytime between now and the next 2 years before the movie comes out. But, yeah, Dune Messiah, they are finally have announced that they're making a 3rd Dune film. Let's go to a question from Jared Parnell, who says, why do you have 2 profiles? It's fairly common on YouTube for people to have second channels. In our case, it's based on just copyright. So if, for whatever reason, one of the publishers or authors of our the books that we read were to claim it, which is completely possible, what we do is technically legal under fair use copyright law based on our audience size. However, YouTube will often side with creators when it comes to shutting down channels. And what I mean by that is, say that a publisher were to, the publisher of Dune were to find all 3 of our Dune, the different versions that we have. They can separately make claims on all of those videos. And despite the fact that we could legally defend it in, say, like a court of law or something like that, YouTube's system allows them to make those complaints. And if they are justified by YouTube's algorithm, which is mainly non-personnel based, it's a machine that does it, they can shut down our channel if there's 3 copyright strikes. This has happened before. This is why we have 2 separate channels. And so in order to combat that, we have all of our full form content on the channel titled Echo Wirm, and all of our daily upload content and original content and other stuff like that over on this channel, Echo Wirm Audiobooks. So that's kind of the long, short explanation of why there are 2 separate channels and what each of them is. So one is our full form material, one is our daily uploads. So if you are new to the channel and you've never seen Echo Wirm Audiobooks, feel free to go check us out there. Obviously, this is this channel where this is coming live from. We've been doing daily chapters of The Hunger Games, as well as daily chapters of The Red Pyramid, the first of the Kane Chronicles books. When I say Hunger Games, I do have a caveat. They have claimed us before in the past for our Hunger Games readings. I've already done Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. It's available for free, just not on YouTube. It's available over on Vimeo.com. We have links in the description below and on both channels, as well as Patreon for free. You should not need to sign up for anything to listen to Hunger Games or Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Hunger Games is airing daily chapters over on Patreon. So every night around midnight or 1 o'clock Eastern, a new chapter will come out of the Hunger Games. For my paying members, this is about 2 months in advance of the regular channel, we are also doing Catching Fire. So Catching Fire airs for the paying members and Hunger Games airs for the non-paying members. In about 2 months, then Catching Fire will become available for non-paying members, if that makes any sense. Let's go then to a question from J-Rock, who says, when did Percy Jackson meet the Canes? I see that he mentions that in Wrath of the Triple Goddess. Yeah, there is a reference to that in the new Percy Jackson book. So the Cane Chronicles is a trilogy. Same with Magnus Chase. All of the kind of the Greek mythology series of Rick Riordan's have 5 books, but all of his tangential ones, the Norse ones, and the Egyptian ones have 3 books. The thing about the Cane Chronicles is they finished the 3rd book with a loose plot thread on purpose. And in order to resolve that, then Rick Riordan wrote kind of a short story novella. And so there are 3 short stories combining Percy and Annabeth with Carter and Sadie from the Cane Chronicles. And then he took these 3 short stories and combined them together to kind of tie up the loose plot threads of the Cane Chronicles. It's called Demigods and Magicians. It's currently available over on Patreon. It will be up on the regular channel once we're done with the Cane Chronicles, because like I said, it takes place after the Cane Chronicles. It also takes place in the timeline after Blood of Olympus, so it's after Cane Chronicles and after Heroes of Olympus, but before Trials of Apollo and before the new Percy Jackson books. So that's where that kind of sits in. So yes, there are technically 4 Cane Chronicles books, and that's where the Canes meet Percy Jackson and Annabeth and that sort of thing. Let's go then to a question from Sarah, who says, do you have book 3 yet of the Heroes of Olympus? Yeah, we should have all of them. So we've done all 5 of the original Percy Jackson books. Then we have done all 5 of the Heroes of Olympus books. And then there are going to be 3 new Percy Jackson books, 2 of which are already out. One is called Chalice of the Gods, came out last year. We've already done that. The other one is called Wrath of the Triple Goddess, just came out last month in September. We've already done that one as well. The 3rd one will probably come out next September. So obviously not out yet. We don't have an audiobook of it. And then after those books takes place Trials of Apollo. So that's where Trials of Apollo takes place. After Trials of Apollo, then we get the Sun and the Star. So Sun and the Star, obviously it is over this side of me. I have been working on that. That's the Nico D'Angelo adventure, talking about just him specifically. And that takes place after Trials of Apollo. So that will come out on the channel after Trials of Apollo as well. Question from Pete Jonas, who says, did Rick forget Percy is invincible from bathing in the Styx? No, he did not. There are certain moments that he does forget certain things. It's unclear what Annabeth means by her knife in Chalice of the Gods and Wrath of the Triple Goddess. That is kind of a loose plot thread that people are kind of confused about. As am I. I'm going to try to dig deep into that and see if I can get an answer on that, because someone was asking me about why Annabeth has her knife back. She does get it back temporarily in Demigods and Magicians, but she doesn't keep it. Because it's kind of a magical apparition sort of thing. But in terms of the plot thread with Percy being invincible, he's not anymore. Because after the new Percy Jackson series, the 3 books, takes place after Heroes of Olympus. So don't get confused. It doesn't go Percy Jackson book 5 and then Percy Jackson book 6. There are 5 books in between that. A lot happens in that. And one thing that happens in that, in the 2nd book, is Percy loses his memory and arrives at Camp Jupiter, the Roman camp. And part of his necessitating actions to, or his requirement to enter Camp Jupiter is he has to wade through, is it the river? It's not the river Lethe, but it's whatever river is, it's like the little Tiber, but it represents something greater. It's the river outside of Camp Jupiter. And when he passes through that, he loses all magical enchantments that have been placed on him, including his bathing in the river Styx. So after he walks through that river in order to get to Camp Jupiter, he loses his invincibility, and he is now vincible, for lack of a better phrase. So yes, Rick did not forget about that. You just haven't read that book. Sarah W. says, are you sure the new Percy series is a trilogy and not 5 like the other main Percy series? I'm not sure, but that's what's been announced, because the plot of the new 3 books is the fact that Percy is getting these 3 letters in order to go to university. And so what's been announced so far as we're aware, is the first book, Chalice of the Gods, where he gets a letter from Ganymede. The second one, The Wrath of the Triple Goddess, where he gets a letter from Hecate. And the third one, which has not been named, nor has the plot been revealed at all, which is where he will presumably get that third letter. We have no idea what is beyond that. It has not been announced. So it certainly could be, because like I said, if they don't, this becomes the only of the mini-series, like, the greater series as a whole is called the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles. In the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles, you have the Percy Jackson series, which is the original 5 Percy Jackson, and the new 3 Percy Jackson. And then you have the Heroes of Olympus 5, and you have the Trials of Apollo 5. So this new Percy Jackson series will be the only one of those that isn't 5 books long. But as far as we know, only 3 are announced or have been prepared for, if that makes any sense. Feel free to keep asking questions in the chat here. I know we started a little early, so people are just getting off school and work and that sort of thing. So a little slower start than usual to our chat. But if we go to my pre-prepared questions, one from Graham Daniel, who says, are the chapters of Among the Hidden updated? I don't know what you mean by that. All of the chapter stamps in the description should be correct. But in terms of, do I have all of the books? No. I have the first 4 of the 7. I'm currently working on book 5. I'm hoping to have that to you guys in the next couple weeks. I have about 50 pages left, so it should take me just a couple of days to finish up. And then I have to edit it and put it all together for a full form. So, SJ de Taco Bomb says, I've never heard someone say Hecate. I mispronounced it when I first did the read through of Sea of Monsters. I think I said Hecate. But the Greek pronunciation, when a word ends in E in Greek, you always pronounce it. There are very few exceptions. I can't think of any exceptions off the top of my head. Neptune is obviously a Roman word, so it wouldn't be Neptune. But like other characters like Chione, or off the top of my head, trying to think of any other characters. Tyche. Greek words that end with E, you typically pronounce that. So instead of saying Hecate or Hecate, it would be pronounced Hecate. Same with Hebe instead of Hebe. I was pronouncing it Hectate in my head. Yeah, there's only the one T. Non Diego says, will you read Heroes of Olympus, Son of Neptune? I have. Yes, it is on the channel. If you check the playlist where it says Camp Half-Blood Chronicles, Son of Neptune should be in there. So let me know if you have trouble finding it. All of the Heroes of Olympus should be done. All of the Percy Jackson books should be done. Let's go to a question from Lepuki Wookie, who says, did Percy really say COVID mask? Yeah, in Wrath of the Triple Goddess, there is, I think it's when he's at his mother's cafe. I could be wrong about that. It could be a different location. But there is a character. So the Percy Jackson timeline is confusing, right? Because it takes place over about 6 years. Like everything in the whole Camp Half-Blood universe takes place over about 6 to 7 years. And obviously the first book came out in 2005, and the most recent book came out in 2024, which is a 19-year gap. So if we go by the original timeline, where Percy and Annabeth are born in 1993, that means that Percy and Annabeth in 2024 are 31 years old. That's very much not the case. Obviously, they are still 17 years old, according to canon. 18 when we move into Trials of Apollo, thank you. So the current timeline takes place in the current year. So Wrath of the Triple Goddess takes place in 2024, presumably, or after COVID, for certain. And in one of the scenes, there is a character wearing an N95 mask, and Percy names it and says COVID mask. So yes, that is actually written in the book. COVID is canon. Let's go to a question from Platinum Pony, who says, Leo is dead during Wrath of the Triple Goddess, right? Not specifically. So this isn't really a spoiler. I'll try not to. My rule on spoilers is if it's out on the channel for non-paying members, then it's free to talk about. So at the end of Blood of Olympus, Leo sacrifices himself for the rest of the demigods. But he prepares for it by kind of, I don't know how to describe it. He basically implants Festus with like an antidote, so that when he dies, Festus can revive him, if that makes any sense. And so between the end of Heroes of Olympus and Trials of Apollo, Leo dies and then comes back to life and then meets with Calypso. And that is the end of Blood of Olympus. Like, all of that kind of takes place not at the same time. It's kind of confusing. The timeline's a little confusing. So Leo is dead, and then he's revived. So during the new Percy Jackson books, Leo is either dead before he's revived, or he has been revived and is on Ogygia with Calypso. So yes, the answer is yes, kind of. SJ to Taco Bomb says, I just finished listening to the first Percy Jackson book. I thought I was going to have to wait for you to release the other books. I'm glad I don't. Yeah, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. I should have 12 done, working on the 13th over on Patreon, if that makes any sense. COVID is canon. I don't know why that's so. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I have some pretty good one-liners. Question from Rizzo, who says, can you release the Chronicles of Narnia, The Last Battle, as soon as possible? Good news is it's already out on Patreon. So if you go over to Patreon, it is already out. I have a bunch of advanced content over there. It should hit the channel within 2 months of being over on Patreon. It's just $3 a month, and you get everything in advance of the channel by a couple months here. So Last Battle, the entire Narnia series is available over there, obviously over on here for free. The first 6 are available. The 7th book should start as soon as we're done with the Hunger Games. I want to say we're about halfway through the Hunger Games now, so give it a couple weeks, and you will start seeing The Last Battle appear on the channel here. And then it should be up in full form probably early December, would be my guess, if I remember my timeline correctly. Let's go to a question from Glenn, who says, in reference to Harry Potter, where is Mahuta mentioned in the books? Good question. So for those that don't know Harry Potter, or kind of the greater non-book canon, if that makes any sense, the extended universe of Harry Potter, there are multiple wizarding schools. Obviously, in Goblet of Fire, we see Beauxbaton or Beauxbatons and Durmstrang or Durmstrang, and Hermione also mentions one in Brazil, which we now know, outside of the books, has been named Castelbrucho. There are a bunch of them around the world. There's Dorfstroyets in Russia. There is Mahuta in Japan. There's Wadagu, I think is the name of it, in Uganda. There's one in the United States, Ilvermorny. And so there's all these wizarding schools, and you're asking, where is that written in the books? It's not. So for a while, J.K. Rowling had kind of a private blog where she would just drop like lore material, and it is canon, obviously, because she's the author. And so that's where we get information about those other schools. And like I said, the one in Japan is called Mahuta. Liam Peteron says, when did Percy get his 3rd letter? Good question. So because of the timeline, right? So the books that are currently being written about Percy Jackson are filling the space in between Heroes of Olympus and the Trials of Apollo. So we already know what comes after them. And one of the questions is, when did Percy get his 3rd letter? Because by the first Trials of Apollo book, we know that Percy has his 3rd letter. He gets that presumably in the book that's not out yet. So after Wrath of the Triple Goddess is Percy Jackson 8, the book that's not out yet, and then, yeah, then of course he will get the letter. It's kind of a spoiler, but that's the nature of prequels. And then we go on to Trials of Apollo, where he is preparing to go to school with Annabeth in Camp Jupiter. Sarah W. says, did you already do videos for the 2 books, Percy Jackson, Greek Gods, and Greek Heroes? No. Greek Gods is over my shoulder somewhere, and Greek Heroes is over in my yet-to-read pile, which is to my left. So I just finished Demigods and Magicians a couple weeks ago. Greek Gods is next on my docket of Percy Jackson tangential books, and then after that we will do Percy Jackson's Greek Heroes. I have a whole list. Where's my phone at here? I have a whole list of like the side books of Rick Riordan that I still need to read. So, for example, I still have yet to read the Kane Chronicles Survival Guide. I still have yet to read the short story Percy Jackson and the Singer of Apollo. There are some Camp Half-Blood tangential stories called My Two-Headed Guidance Counselor, The Library of Deadly Weapons, My Demon Seder Tea Party, My Personal Zombie Apocalypse. And then you get things like the Kane Chronicles Brooklyn House Magician's Manual, Nine from the Nine Worlds, which is a Magnus Chase tangential book. I have yet to read all of those. And I will do them eventually. They're on my list. It's just going to take a while to get to. So, to answer your question specifically, no, I have not done that one yet. I have done the Demigod Files, I have done the Demigod Diaries, and I have done Camp Half-Blood Confidential. Or no, Camp Jupiter Classified. I have not yet done Camp Half-Blood Confidential. SJ to Taco Bomb says, it's all fun and games until you get sent to Wizard Brazil. Yeah, I completely agree. Please don't send me to Wizard Brazil. Couple more of the pre-prepared questions, and then we're kind of short this week, which is fine, but you guys are more than welcome to keep asking questions in the chat if you want to. I'm happy to answer pretty much most things on camera. Question from Exited or Excited, who says, why do you pronounce bagel the way you do? Good question. I pronounce a lot of things funny. The AG sound where I'm from is pronounced egg, like instead of agriculture, it's agriculture, and flag and bag and that sort of thing. That's the natural accent of the people around me where I grew up. So what you hear on the channel is me both having that and trying to combat that. So a lot of the time I'll say like, instead of saying vag, I will say vag, just to try to battle my natural tendency to stretch out the A sound. But yeah, it's my natural accent and me trying to fight my natural accent is essentially the short answer to that one. A bunch of questions here from Pogo Sam. And before we get to them, I do want to give a few shout outs. First of all, I want to give shout outs to my national level patrons. So these are the people that go above and beyond and do $5 a month or more over on Patreon. Again, there you see it on the screen, patreon.com/EchoWorm. These are Andrew Gomez, Angelo Rodriguez, Braden Vera, Derek Rosario, Duncan Burley, Aaron Marie Thompson, Faded, Fake Koi, Anna Wuchek, Hardip Singh, Jeff McJefferson, Kylie Morton, Lindsay Wood, Kate S., Lucy Ranson, Lucy, Lyra, MB, Matsukur, Mika Tamandel, Mirage GSM, Moses Ojibodi, Nathaniel Barlow, Knickerdoodles, Peyton Austin, Lobo Jenkins, Riley Smeaton, Sadie Martinez, Skylar Seidenkranz, Suniva Grownley, Taylor Grandy, Trevor Lyman, Trusty Astorius, X-Ray, Alexei Storyakov, Jackson Fur, Pogo Sam, Adora Shadow R, and Yeni Diaz. Those are the $5 a month or more, and then a huge shout out, of course, to my upper level patrons. The League 2 tier, that's $10 a month or more, Brandon Doty, Hessa Al-Habashi, Rockin' Ryan 99, Victoria Libretto, Rania, Katie Rose, Bella Joy, Goose, and Srinija Srinivasan. $10 a month or more, you get this screen right here on all of my video uploads and all of the chapter uploads. $15 a month or more is League 1, that's Sneevetics and Brooke Bursma. And then my champion tier. Champion tier is fun because not only do these people give me a lot of money, and I'm very thankful for it, but all of the people on the champion tier are welcome to the book club. So when I say book club, for $25 a month or more, you are able to get a free book every month. I will send you at the beginning of every month a free copy of whatever we are reading on the channel. So those include John Buck, Charles Jacobson, Donald Easter, Dalton Bailey, Lydia Bryant, Zhukov Crawford, and Joseph Morrill. If you are interested in joining the book club or any level of Patreon, go over to patreon.com and feel free to become a member if that's something that you are capable of and interested in doing. SJ to Taco Bomb, and then I'll go back to Pogo Sam's questions. I just want to give a shout out to my patrons real quick. SJ to Taco Bomb says Canadian moment, or Montana perhaps. A little further east than that. I obviously have the Minnesota flag behind me, so I'll let you guys make assumptions of where I'm from. Obviously, you see the Pacific FC thing, and I'm wearing a Vancouver Canucks shirt, so that's where I get my influence for Frank's voice from, is my knowledge of the Vancouver accent, and just the Canadian accent in general. TTV Aidenson says, so Magnus Chase. I'm guessing you're asking when I'm going to do Magnus Chase. I answered that earlier. I'm happy to answer it again. Magnus Chase will come after Trials of Apollo. So we're currently working on Trials of Apollo over on Patreon. Once we're done with all 5 books, then we'll do Magnus Chase. But Xpogo Sam gets a specific shout out. He's not here. He had something going on today. But Xpogo Sam has been kind of front and center of the fan club for The Radiation Effect. So The Radiation Effect is a book that you can find on the channel. I have, I think, the first 18 chapters available for free. 19th should be coming shortly, or either both 18 and 19 coming very shortly. But The Radiation Effect is my own book. I've been writing this, and every time I finish a chapter in the first draft, I have been uploading it as a live audiobook. So you guys can listen to those first, like I said, 19 or so chapters of The Radiation Effect. And Xpogo Sam has been part of the fan club over on Discord. We have a Discord chat if you're interested down in the comments below or the description below. And we've just been going through and pointing stuff out and making sure that as I'm writing this, obviously in the first draft, that I am guiding the audience in the way that I want to, and that they're understanding kind of the things that I'm putting down and they're picking up, for lack of a better term. But we've also started a wiki page. So let me pull this up real quick. So this is the Radiation Effect wiki. Let me switch my screen here. So this over here, if you go to irea.fandom.com, you can go to the Radiation Effect wiki. This is just kind of a compilation that we've put together of the different characters and different things that you should maybe know about as you're going through it. Eventually, we'll go through and do like synopses of all the different chapters so you can kind of follow along with what is trying to be said. There aren't really any spoilers beyond what is out on the channel. So obviously there's Emma. She's kind of the main character. But that is over on the wiki. You guys are more than welcome to join there if you want to follow along as you're reading. And so the following couple of questions happen to, or have to do with the Radiation Effect. This is, like I said, my original book. So if you guys have no idea what we're talking about, go check it out. It starts with chapter 1 called The Alley. It's the big red AI-generated background in the folder of the same name. But first question, how has your outline for the Radiation Effect changed over the years? Very significantly. There was a follow-up question here that says, are there any plot points you ditched for the existing chapters? Yeah, significantly. So this is a book, I'm in my mid-20s now. This is a book that I have been at least formulating in some point since I was 13 years old. And so all of the characters are drastically different. The main characters have the same names. So the main character has always been named Johnny Sparks. The female protagonist has always been Emma Guerin. I think the biggest change in terms of the very beginning of the series is instead of it kind of being like a military association, the effects were almost more like a Divergent type power, or like a Percy Jackson type demigod ability. And instead of them just being a part of this organization, they went to a school, which Truman High School, but it was basically Hogwarts for people with radiation effects. It was very derivative of Hogwarts. It had 5 houses or 5, I can't even remember what I called them, but essentially and then that tied into Avatar: The Last Airbender, because it was air, water, earth, fire, and then there was a 5th one, which was kind of the outsiders, the ones that didn't get sorted. So that was kind of the premise originally. Like I said, there was Johnny, Emma, and then Emma had a boyfriend who died very early on in the series. But part of the story of the first book originally was Johnny having to get over his jealousy of this boyfriend and eventually becoming close with the boyfriend as his best friend, and then that boyfriend dying. And that character's name was Riley. Now, obviously, if you're familiar with the story, that is significantly different. Riley is not Emma's boyfriend. Emma's boyfriend is Johnny from pretty much the very beginning of the story. And Riley is Emma's brother. And the character motivations and the character powers are very, very different from the way they were in the original draft. In terms of when it was kind of crafted to become what it is now, where you get the military organization and you get Emma's dad being the prime minister and you get kind of the sabotage of everything going on. There were still some pretty big differences up until a couple years ago. Originally, squads had 8 members instead of 6. I shrunk it to kind of make it, A, make the character development greater, B, make it feel more like a tight-knit group. And so in having this group of 6 be a group of 8, there was an additional male character whose name was Zach, and he was kind of the, I don't know how to describe him. He was kind of this know-it-all outsider rich kid. His dad was the billionaire instead of Kent's dad. And he kind of, everything he saw with the world, he wanted the best for the world as long as it was what he saw was best for the world. And so he kind of had conflicting views with a lot of main characters, and eventually kind of had this older, younger brotherly relationship with Kent that I took out. But there are certain parts of his plotline. He was supposed to last through about 3 or 4 books. And then I have decided to then take his major character beats, and eventually I'll give them to a character that has yet to be introduced. He has a pretty tragic end, and I'm going to give that to one of the male characters that I'm introducing in a later book. And so Zach no longer exists as a character. And then they had an additional female character named Latasha, who was very poorly developed, I think, in my original drafts for the book. And their first mission wasn't the mission to China. They actually had a previous mission to Iraq, where they have to kind of go after this terrorist cell. Emma gets significant PTSD from it, and part of the plot for her character in the original kind of formulation of the book was her overcoming her PTSD on missions. It's a bit different now. Obviously, she from the out is a fairly strong character. She does have moments of just like freezing and having kind of breakdowns, which we see in her kind of POV chapters and the chapters around her big moments. But that first mission I scrapped because as soon as I took out Latasha's death, she was really only there to kind of give life or death situations to this story from early on. And she was so underdeveloped that I felt like her death wasn't as impactful as it needed to be. And in taking her out, then that mission kind of lacks reason to be in there, and the pacing is significantly different. And so then I shifted that first mission, took that Iraq mission out entirely, and shifted that then to their first mission being in China, which was already China. The mission and the plot line in China and what happens out of the mission in China has always been there. So those are kind of the big changes. Sarah W. says, what happened to Chapter 18 on the Radiation Effect playlist? It is scheduled for, I think, next week. So it shouldn't have been available for anyone who's not a paying member on Patreon before. It is currently set to release, I think, next week then, and then 2 weeks after that will be Chapter 19. But all of that is available over on Patreon. There was a follow-up question, though. Have you decided on Morgan's effect yet? No. So, the interesting thing... So, Morgan is a character that is introduced very, very briefly. I think in Chapter 7 originally she's mentioned. And then she shows up in Chapter 8 as essentially she kind of tags along with Kent and Liz at Homecoming. And she's this character that is kind of a stand-in for... Kent has serious feelings for Emma, or he thinks he does. And she is kind of the person who talks him down off of this ledge, where he's like, I have to have Emma, or like, there's no point. And she's like, you're 14 years old, relax, like things are fine. And obviously I didn't expect her character to have the impact that it obviously did, because you're not the only one who's been asking me about Morgan. But obviously you're very interested in her and her backstory and what she means for Kent's story. She will reappear, certainly. I'll sprinkle her a little bit. Her big impact in the story is going to come in Book 4. She has a very significant role to play in Book 4, and the character development for some other characters. I have not yet decided on her effect. It will be revealed, but the big thing about effect is they are very much tied to the backstories or the personalities of the characters. And so I've changed personalities and I've changed characters I've changed personalities to fit radiation effects that needed to be in there, and I've changed radiation effects to fit the personalities of certain characters. And so with this, I think it's just finding the one that fits her correctly, so that I don't give her one and then have to reshape what kind of my plan for her is, because her plan her character plan is very much set in stone in my head. It's very important for the impact of one very specific character. So yes, I will have that eventually, but as of now, I have not decided on her effect. Sarah W says, how many books will be in the Radiation Effect series? 7. Originally it was 4, so that's another big change. Originally it was going to be a tetralogy or a quadrilogy. The correct term is tetralogy, but I know a lot of people think of it as a quadrilogy just because it fits better with trilogy. But the 4 books were supposed to take place. The first one is their freshman year, second one is their sophomore year, and then go through their high school years. I realized that there are certain character elements that aren't really accessible for them while they're in high school. I wanted kind of this after feel for them, where they have to then become adults and still be a part of this program or decide not to be a part of this program because they have that choice at that point, and just the way that their lives kind of diverge after high school and how that affects the plot of the series and their developments. And then there were some significant like character developments and plot points that I felt I couldn't develop as fully as necessary in 4 books. So it's going to be 7 books. First one obviously up on the channel. The second one will be up almost immediately after the first one's done in a rough draft form. And then from there, we'll see where it goes in the future. Another question, do any of Liz's siblings have effects yet? Yes and no, I don't know what they are. It's one of those like, so her older brother obviously had one. I haven't given much thought into what that is or what that could be. Liz herself she's an energy elementalist. She has kind of, I jokingly call them plasma cannons. She can shoot like blasts of energy from her hands essentially. And so she is what the organization considers an elementalist. People that essentially think of Avatar: The Last Airbender, they're like benders. So you got fire elementalists, earth elementalists, whatever. All the people that can work materials essentially, and hers is physical energy that she can expunge from her body. Her younger siblings, it all has to do with age, right? So radiation effects typically show up around the time you're 11 to about 14 is when they appear, and then they usually last about 10 years. They can last shorter than that. They can last longer than that. I think Jordan, off the top of my head, if I remember his backstory correctly from the details that I've given it, Jordan got his at about 7 or 8 years old. Very early, but it has to do with the traumatic incident that caused him to develop one. So Liz's younger siblings, she's got the twins. They do not have radiation effects. The youngest ones do not. They're too young yet. She's got a sister who, is she 11 or 12? Who, as far as I'm aware, probably doesn't have one. I don't think it would make sense for her to have one yet. She is kind of in the early stages of puberty, but the effect hasn't kicked in yet. Whereas her other younger brother, the one that's immediately below her in the order of her family, probably does have one, but it hasn't been revealed to her, or it hasn't been revealed to just kind of you guys as the readers in general. So I would say yes, her older brother obviously had one, she has one, and then her younger brother has one, but the rest of the family probably not. And her dad doesn't have one anymore. Her mom doesn't have one because she's not a member of the company. Details of which can be found on the wiki, or soon to be found on the wiki as soon as I update it. I also wanted to let you guys know that we do have merchandise available. If you want to support me monetarily, if it's something you're interested in, we do have a shirt that my wife designed. This is the I Ate the Kitchen Table shirt. Of course, if you're unfamiliar with the blunder, back in my Sea of Monsters video, a chapter starts with the words I ate at the kitchen table. I missed one of the words, and it has become my most famous blunder. And you guys don't fail to remind me every single day on that video. But this is in the Percy Jackson cover font, and it also has a little stylized trident. You can get it in a variety of colors and a variety of different shapes and sizes. They're premium unisex tee all the way up to crew neck sweatshirts. So if you guys want to do that, there's a link in the description below, along with a bunch of other stuff like Patreon and Vimeo and the wiki and Discord and Buy Me a Coffee and my music and all that sort of stuff. So all of that's available down below. Those are really all the pre-prepared questions that I had for you guys. Obviously, we've only been doing this for about 40 minutes. We usually do it an hour and a half to 2 hours. But like I said, with the time change, we shifted things. So if you guys have any questions that you want to leave in the chat, I'll stick around as long as you guys want to hang out here. What's your favorite effect in the radiation effect? Good question. So, I have a couple different answers. One of them is what's my favorite effect that you guys know about, and what's my favorite effect overall, because there are a couple ones that haven't been revealed yet that are probably my favorites. There's one character who has the ability to see like the way that the world will happen, if that makes sense, like premonition. There is a character that has the ability to control the temperature of things, like drastically change the temperature in the room, or just like burn things because of the power in their hands. There's a character who can essentially use the Force, like Star Wars can pull things from a distance. It's one thing I've always wanted to be able to do, is reach the remote from across the room. And one of the characters in the series has that ability. Other ones, I'm trying to think that we've seen. Of the main characters, I think my favorite one is probably Liz. I like the plasma cannons. I really like Jordan's too. Jordan is blind in one eye, and as a result developed the ability to see things through echolocation. So I constantly use Avatar The Last Airbender as a reference today for some reason. But if you think of Toph, Beifong, and the way that she sees the world through earthbending, that's essentially how Jordan sees the world too. He can feel things all around him, and that's kind of his ability. Sarah W. says, what other memorable mistakes did you make when recording besides I ate the kitchen table? That's the biggest one. There are, obviously, I trip on my words a lot. There's one in, I think it's Mark of Athena, that someone pointed out recently that I'd never noticed before. Where I think I said the word did, or no, the word Leo's day couldn't, but I think I choked, or I like stuttered when I said day couldn't, and I think I said Leo's dick couldn't, and it just like definitely not what I meant to say and not what's in the text. Occasionally I'll put stuff in the text just as a little watermark. Obviously you guys know the ones from House of Hades. But then I'll put like little wrestling references in just for my own sake. And the reason I do that is people, you'd be shocked. I had no idea about this before I started an audiobook channel. The amount of people that think that when I upload a video, I'm just taking it from somewhere else and uploading it on YouTube. People then take it from my channel and upload it as their own content. It shocks me how many videos I come across that are my own recordings that other people have uploaded as their own content. And so to try to track that down, I have often like put little watermarks in. That way, like if they put my voice through an AI filter, where instead of me reading Harry Potter, it's Daniel Radcliffe reading Harry Potter, but it's definitely my recording because I can go to this point in the book, and if he says something about professional wrestling, then I know that it's my own recording, and then I can strike that channel or whatever. It's just it's very frustrating because obviously I put a lot of work into this channel, and other people can just take it, and there's not a lot I can do to stop that, which is very frustrating. So I have no problem with people sharing my materials, or even the recordings that I make, so long as they give me credit for it. If they say that this is from Echo Wirm, this is from Echo Wirm Audiobooks. There was someone who attempted to make a Patreon account where they were uploading my original material on Patreon over on a separate Patreon account, which is incredibly illegal, at least in the United States. And so that was really frustrating to try to track down. So that's why I do the little watermark stuff. White Squid says, how many children have you ate? None that I can remember consciously is my big answer. SJ to Taco Bomb says, I honestly love it when you stumble with the words. It cracks me up. I do my best. Yeah, I don't do a ton of editing. I really try not to. One of the big things when I started this channel is, so the inspiration for this channel came from James Dobinson, who, if you look up Harry Potter audiobook, the chances are you're probably going to find his recording on YouTube. His YouTube history, and like the number of people that steal his content is really, really sad. Just because he's such a talented narrator, he lost his original channel for the same reason we lost our original channel, and people have been continuously uploading his material and passing it off as their own, and then striking his own new content because of those, and it's very Yeah. So anyways, I got the inspiration for this channel, and one thing that he did in his recordings is he didn't edit any of it, and so it was constant just reading straight through. And for me, when I listened to that, it was like I was in a room listening to someone read to me. And that's what I want this channel to be. I don't want this to feel like official audiobooks. I want this to feel like you are watching a stage play, or you are sitting in a room with your dad or your older brother, just reading these books to you. And that, if you guys know the backstory to this channel, that's why I started recording audiobooks, is I wanted to have a backlog of stuff that I could give my children if something were to happen to me, where they can always have dad reading to them. And I started with my favorite books, Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, and that's where things happen from here. So that's why I leave them in, is I don't want it to feel professional. I just want it to feel like we're just hanging out and I'm reading to you. White Squid says, have you ever gobbled up a child because they ate your wedding ring? No. That's the plot of Lord of the Rings, kind of. But no. I still have my wedding ring somewhere. I'm sure it's upstairs somewhere. I don't usually wear jewelry when I'm on stream or when I'm working, but... Let's go to a question from Don Reimer, who says, who is your favorite character in the Radiation Effect? It varies. My favorite... So, it's kind of the same answer that I gave earlier. It is like, who's my favorite character that you guys know about and why? Or who's my... I have a bunch of different favorite characters based on answers that I can or cannot give you, if that makes any sense. So, like, my favorite character to write for... The easiest character for me to write for is probably Emma. Because Emma's mind, like, the way Emma thinks about the world is very similar to the way that I think about the world. Whereas someone like Jordan is significantly harder. Jordan's backstory is caught up in a lot of trauma, and I have to write through that filter of trauma. Same with Margot. Margot kind of has this whole air to herself that I've never experienced, if that makes any sense. Like, she's very much the person everyone else wants to be, and I feel like that's never been how I've perceived my own life, and so it's difficult to write from that perspective. In terms of, like, which characters... Who's my favorite character in the series is probably Bill Guerin, Emma's dad. Bill Guerin is, like... He's not a main character, but he is the main character, if that makes any sense. Because everything in the series has to do with his decisions and his actions. I like to tell people that, like, the Radiation Effect is Percy Jackson mixed with House of Cards, is probably the best way I can describe it to people. Because the whole plot of it is all political scheming and behind the scenes and Machiavellian politics through the guise of teenagers with special powers. And so... while the main characters are these teenagers with special powers, everything behind that is stemmed from this one character making either really deceptive decisions or really self-serving decisions or really bad decisions trying to cover up his old past decisions. And so I just get such a kick out of writing through the decisions that Bill Guerin makes, if that makes any sense. Question from White Squid, who says, what is the most expensive thing you own? My house, probably. I think that's most people's answers, is the property that they own if they're a homeowner. Sarah W. says, who's your least favorite character or characters? In terms of are you talking Radiation Effect? My least favorite character... it's probably Jordan. And I feel like that's... A lot of people say that. Well, actually, a lot of people have said Johnny's their least favorite character. And I think as the series goes on, you'll see why my answer isn't Johnny. Because a lot of the series revolves around Johnny's experiences, if that makes any sense. But my least favorite character to write for is probably Jordan. I like his power. I like his ability. But to me, he feels like he just kind of exists, if that makes any sense. He exists and the world happens around him. He doesn't really impact the world in a way that is super negative or super positive. And maybe that's me writing the character. That needs to change that. I don't know how I can really change that based on his personality. It's something to experiment with. But then, yeah, there are characters going forward that I'm not a huge fan of. But For the most part, I try to give people. George R. R. Martin, the author of Game of Thrones, does this thing, right, where he every time he creates a character, and he's created thousands of characters, every time he creates a character, he gives them a secret. And it helps him kind of feel motivated around these characters, so he doesn't get bored with certain characters. And so, knowing that and writing this now, I think I do something similar, where I always try to give like a motivation to all of these characters. And so Jordan's biggest motivation is to try to break out of not Johnny's shadow necessarily, because obviously physically he's not in Johnny's shadow. He's 6'3", 6'4". But Jordan has always wanted more than was allowed of him as Johnny's kind of protective sibling. Johnny is very, very prude and very like punctual and to the point and rule following, and Jordan has always tried to break out of this. And so with his relationship with Margot, who is already like that, he is so drawn to her because that is who he wants to be. And so all of the characters, I feel like, even minor characters that I've created, that's one thing I try to do, is give them a motivation of who they want to be and how are they going to get there. The one character that answer kind of trips me up on is Kent. Because Kent's big thing is he just doesn't want to be himself. But he doesn't know who he wants to be. And so part of Kent's arc over the series, I'm not going to tell you how long Kent's arc lasts or if I kill him off by the end of the series, but his arc is figuring out who he is based on his background. His background is very, very interesting, and I myself am still trying to piece together what it is or what it means and that sort of thing. White Squid says, you're the only Q&A person that have answered and waited well in many different streams, so I just want to say thanks. Well, thank you. I appreciate you for being here. My least favorite character in Percy Jackson, if we want to shift from the radiation effect back to Percy Jackson, my least favorite character in the Seven's Piper. That's not true. It's probably Jason. Piper is fun in The Lost Hero. She's not very fun after The Lost Hero, in my opinion. Jason is not my favorite character by any means, and I've given reasons in the past why I don't like Jason very much. My favorite character is Nico. My favorite character to narrate for from a POV is Leo. My favorite character to use the accent of is Frank. Definitely Frank. The reason being his accent is a caricature of my own natural accent. White Squid says, is it weird that I own a real hazmat suit? I don't think so. I'm trying to think if there's anything. I mean, obviously I mentioned this before on stream. You see flags behind me. I have a collection of basically every national flag in the world. I have a whole closet full of flags, which I put out in front of my house every time there's a national holiday for a different country. So that's my little quirk. So if yours is hazmat suits, I don't think there's a problem with that. I wanted to go back and see if I missed anything here. I don't think so. Future of the channel is kind of looking like this. So I mentioned my like upcoming reads pile. This is the very top of it. So I got Magic Treehouse books. I got Among the Brave, like I said, the 5th book in the Shadow Children series. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Trials of Apollo. Below that we have Catching Fire, Divergent, The Tale of Despero, Game of Thrones prequel, Fire and Blood, some more readings from the Bible and the Book of Mormon, a local author whose book I have read. I've read a couple of his things on the channel before. And then, like I said, behind me, all of the other series that we're trying to get to. So immediate future, other than just kind of getting to stuff, is right now on the channel, we are working on the Hunger Games and the first book of the Kane Chronicles. After we're done with those, we will then move on to the Last Battle, which is the last of the Chronicles of Narnia books, as well as the Throne of Fire, the second of the Kane Chronicles books. After that is Serpent's Shadow and Catching Fire, at which point then we catch up with what is over on Patreon at the moment. So all of that in between there and Patreon, you can find over on Patreon. It's about a month and a half to 2 months in advance of the the regular channel for free. That's just $3 a month. And over there right now we're working through Catching Fire. Like I said, we're about 2/3 through that. After that we'll do Fablehaven, and then after Fablehaven we'll do Mockingjay. After we're done with Mockingjay, then we'll do Aragon. Everything else on the morning side of things, then we will continue to do Rick Riordan. We're already through all of the Kane Chronicles books over there. We are working on Trials of Apollo. After Trials of Apollo, then we will do Magnus Chase. White Squid asks who I'm voting for. I'm not going to give political opinions on a stream, especially this close to the election. Sarah W says, if you could rewrite or give Divergent and The Maze Runner a different ending, what would it be? Oh boy, Maze Runner I can't give an honest answer to because of the fact that it's been a long time since I've read that book, and I can't exactly remember how the main series ends because I like the prequels so much and I really get the prequels confused for some reason. But Divergent... So here's kind of my thing with Divergent. I really want to like the idea of killing off the main character. I really do, because that was my original plan for the Radiation Effect, is it ends with Johnny dying. I don't think I'm going to do that anymore, based on a couple of things. But the biggest thing is the reaction to what happened in Divergent was so negative that it's kind of turned me off of the idea of making that the ending. Like I would like to resolve things a little better than just, having this big conflict and killing off one of the main characters at the end of it, and that's the end of the book. So with Divergent, I think that's the biggest thing I would change, is find a way to change the story where that doesn't have to happen, if that makes any sense. Let's go to a question from... I'd like to stick with what we're chatting about with books. So I'll keep talking, Sarah, about Divergent and Maze Runner. I'm trying to, the first Maze Runner book, the end of it is, I think, picture perfect in the way it ends. I don't love the narration at the end where it's like, oh, this was all a test, and let's see what these characters are going to do in the future. It feels a little too on the nose from an out of narration perspective, if that makes any sense. But especially the way that they had it in the film. The way that the team kind of falls apart and the sacrifice at the end and the way that they move on into the unknown. I really, really like that idea. So I probably wouldn't change anything about the first Maze Runner off the top of my head. But like I said, it's been a long time since I read the actual series. Warren Kendall says, what made you choose Houston for the Radiation Effect? Good question. So this is one of those, I think I've answered something similar on stream before, where I think someone asks me how much of my writing is influenced by what I have read, and even read on the channel. So Houston stemmed from Leo. Really, it did. So Leo Valdez in Heroes of Olympus is from Houston, and he speaks Spanish. And for whatever reason, I wanted my main female protagonist, who is, by all means, one of the whitest characters you'll ever meet. I wanted her to have this secret quirk where she speaks Spanish more than most people that you'll ever meet. And by way of, I made her, one of her grandparents, Cuban. And so she speaks fluent Spanish, as kind of this hidden talent. Not that speaking a second language is necessarily a talent, but people don't expect it of her because she looks so white. And that link to Leo then, I think, is what made me want to connect her to Houston, if that makes any sense. Her connection to Rice University is based on a friend of mine who was first chair in the Rice Orchestra. But the connection to Houston, the reason I chose it, is, I think, based on Leo. And then, I'm trying to think other connective characters. The physical appearance of Margot and Emma is both stemmed from Annabeth, I think. Margot is obviously the tall extreme of that, and Emma is the short extreme of that. But both are kind of stemmed from that main female blonde protagonist, separating there. Johnny physically is very much based on myself, I guess, for if you ever needed to visualize Johnny. Jordan is based on a friend of mine. Also, very much a side tangent. And I may end up renaming Jordan because Jordan's story, oddly enough, his backstory and name are based on a friend of mine whose life eventually ended up taking a very, very similar path to what happens to Jordan in the book. So I wrote this character, and there are some very serious plot points in his life. And all of a sudden, I get out of high school, and everything about my friend that I based this character on, these things have happened to. And it's very weird. So, anyways, that's my connection to Jordan there. But let's see here. Warren Kendall says, I'm from Houston. Hearing all the locations in it made me love them. Well, thank you. I chose Wyoming because I spent a lot of time driving through there on school trips when I was in high school. And I just, if you've ever been to eastern Wyoming, there's a lot of nothing. It's just empty. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's not farmland the way like Kansas or Nebraska is. It's just all like ranging land. So you see like a lot of like ranches and farms and just like open grass fields and buttes, and it's absolutely beautiful. But there was such a feeling of nothingness there that I wanted to set the story there, but have something there, like give it a reason to have something there. And so that's that's where the backstory to why Tylersville is in Wyoming is where it is. Johnny's from Minneapolis. Obviously, I grew up in and around Minneapolis. Jordan is from Tallahassee. I grew up going down there. My grandparents used to live in Tallahassee. Margot's from Canada. My brother had a friend in high school who was from Toronto. I made her from Quebec. And then Kent is from New York. His fun fact, Kent's house, I give an address to Kent's childhood home in the book, like a physical address. And that physical address is the house that my grandfather grew up in Brooklyn. So that's my connection to where Kent's from, is that he lives in the house that my grandfather grew up in. Let's see here. White Squid says, when is your next live stream? The 2 weeks from today. So I think it's the 7th of November, because a week from today is going to be Halloween. So typically around about 4 to 5 Eastern is when we start these. So look for that. I'll put announcements out on Discord and on Patreon and that stuff. Hallow says, quick question on elemental effects. Are they also similar to how they form like Jordan's? Are they just effects that people gain around the age, or something else entirely? Yeah, so the backstory to effects, like I said, most of this can be or will be able, you can find it on the wiki. But effects are triggered by something called an ITI, I think it stands for Initial Trauma Incident, or Isolated Trauma Incident. What that means is around the time of puberty, or a little before or a little after the onset of puberty, for people who have the ability to have radiation. It's a genetic disorder stemmed from radiation testing. That's why they're called radiation effects. But each effect is developed from the ITI. And the ITI is something traumatic that happens to you in your life that triggers a response to that atmosphere around you. So for example, Johnny, his ITI is a seizure. He has an epileptic seizure, and when he comes to, his memory has been changed. He now has the ability to remember everything from that point onward. Jordan gets blinded. He lives in Florida. There was a storm, a pretty significant storm that he was caught outside in, and basically took a piece of shrapnel to the face, lost his eye, lost the functionality of his vision, and as a result developed an effect that allows him to see in a different way. There was a question about Liz's effect. I haven't really clarified her ITI or really even given that much thought to it, but given the fact that her ability is kind of an amalgamate, or I can't think of the word I'm looking for, a manifestation of just energy and just like getting rid of all of that anxious energy and stemming it into something. my thing for her, she was probably in a situation where high stress situation where she's trapped of some sort, or needs to get out of a situation, and she has to physically expunge energy to get her out of that, is what her ITI would be. So when it comes to elemental effects, it's a little different. It's oftentimes, so the closest elementalist other than Liz in the group is Andrew, Emma's older brother, who's a water elementalist. I haven't given a ton of thought to his ITI, but it has something to do with water and him needing to protect himself or save himself or find himself in a situation where he needed to be able to move water. And so as a result, he has the ability to water bend, essentially. So it has to do with using elements to protect or defend or get out of situations. There are other characters who can do it with fire, other characters that can do it with metal, other characters that can do it with fire. I just said fire. With air, just all of the main elements, and then like Liz has energy. There's wood, I suppose, would be an option. Anything that is a physical material. Stinker says, I recently started Stephen King's It. Have you read it before? I have. I will not be reading it on the channel. You will find out why very shortly. White Squid says, are you looking for publishers? I am. I've been in contact with a few different houses, but that was weird. Sorry, my camera just fidgeted. Hopefully that didn't affect the stream at all. Yeah, I'm looking for publishers, and hopefully, my goal would be to have the book published early 2026, would be my goal. So finish it, essentially, finish it in a full form, go through it and revise it a few times through an editor and that sort of thing, and then, yeah, it'd be nice. White Squid, I have no idea what you're talking about. How to waterproof? Yeah, not entirely sure. Sarah W says, would you ever read the Stranger Things books? So I'm going to come in completely blind here. Stranger Things, I thought was an original property. I could be wrong about that. Are you... Yeah, you started watching episode 1. I want to say it's an original property. Yeah, Stranger Things is not based on anything. The Duffer Brothers, the creators of it, wrote it as an original series. It's was originally planned to be one single season, and then the season was so successful that they ended up making several more, and now I think they're planning on doing a season 5 fairly shortly. Yeah, White Squid, I still have no idea what you're talking about. But yeah, Sarah, to answer your question, Stranger Things is not a book series. Unless there's something else very similar to it that is related to it, or if there's like a novelization of it. But Stranger Things, the TV show, is based on itself. It's an original property. White Squid, you can call it entertaining. I still have no idea what you're talking about. Warren Kendall says, when did you start writing The Radiation Effect? In its earliest form, I was probably 13 years old. It got the name The Radiation Effect probably when I was 14 or 15. This was about 10 years or so ago. And the name obviously comes from the fact that that's what the main characters have. By the end of the book, I think it will become very clear. I don't want to spoil anything, and I want to be very careful when I say this. By the end of the book, I think it will be very clear to those reading why the first book is called The Radiation Effect. It's not called Radiation Effects. It's not called Children with Radiation Effect. It's called The Radiation Effect. Could be a double entendre. I don't know. But it very much... The climax of the book has to do with something very, very specific. So I'm very happy to continue answering questions on The Radiation Effect. I'm very passionate about this project. So Warren Kendall or Hallow or even Sarah W., if you guys have questions about it, I am more than happy to answer. I'm trying to see if I missed anything here. Why does Emma lie about her radiation? Good question. So this is something I don't know that I can give a clear answer for two reasons. One, I don't know that the entire truth has been fully formed in my head. And B, I think it's something that I will want to reveal later. As to the big question is, how did Emma's dad know that she was going to be a skip? And I don't know that I've decided on that entirely. So the backstory to this, and this might be a little spoiler to those of you who haven't read it yet, is at the beginning of the book, Emma passes off the ability to throw things accurately as her radiation effect. That is what she claims it to be. That's what all the records say it is. It is claimed that Emma's radiation effect is the ability to throw things accurately. And she's very, very good at it. Later on, it's revealed that it's not her radiation effect. It's just a skill that she has developed very, very specifically and accurately. And once it's revealed that she is a skip, which is a person who has the genetic ability to develop a radiation effect but doesn't end up getting one, the question is, why did she pretend? And the reason why she pretended or how she got the ability to throw things accurately is her father made her. Her father, for basically 10 years of her life, had her train in private to learn how to pick up an object, feel its weight, feel its density, feel its size, and be able to throw it at a target downrange as accurately as possible. The question is, why did he do that? Why did he anticipate her being a skip? Because as far as we know, there is no way to predict it. So Emma gives the explanation that she doesn't know why her dad made her do that. She knows that her uncle was, her dad's brother was a skip, and there isn't really discrimination against skips, but it makes life significantly harder for them because of the fact that they're surrounded by people who have these kind of extra human abilities, and they don't, but they still have to serve because that's the condition of their membership. And so kind of the big question is how did her dad know, and why did he make her hide it? And so I don't know that I can fully answer that, but it definitely stems from his relationship to his brother and his brother's experiences as a skip. What's unclear, and what I haven't quite decided on yet, is both of Emma's brothers have radiation effects. And she's been training since she was 4. So obviously they didn't have radiation effects when they were 4, because that's unheard of. It's not impossible necessarily. Jordan got his when he was like 7. But it's not... The question I'm trying to get here is did her dad train her brothers too? Because obviously it didn't matter in the long term, but did he anticipate them not having them either? And what effect did that have on them, especially once they finally developed those radiation effects? It's an interesting question that I haven't quite figured out an answer for. Warren Kindle says, how many books are you planning to write in this series? 7 at the moment. So the first 4, it's kind of like Harry Potter, where each one is like a school year. And then by the end of the series, I want the characters to be about 21, 22 years old, is kind of where I want things to end. Zach Chadbourne says, I think Stranger Things has books or some written stuff about Hopper and some background stuff for some of the characters. They probably do. I'm unfamiliar with them. But yeah, in terms of, I think the question, I'm putting words in Sarah's mouth and she can clarify for herself, but the question about the Stranger Things books, there aren't, because it's an original property. Sarah W. says, I'm very similar in that I always wanted to write a story based on a haunted house with different rooms and keys, basically a mix of Goosebumps and Lock and Key. I think that'd be a great idea. I'd be very interested. Hello says, is the wiki you mentioned to the radiation effect have a link posted yet, or is it still being worked on? I think I have it in the description below. Check right below my face. If you click on the stream title, you should have a bunch of links, and I think one of them is the wiki. Otherwise, go to irea.fandom.com. It's not all complete. There's a lot I still need to work on, but I'm slowly updating it over time. And if there are things that you specifically want added to it, check out the Discord link, and feel free to contact me on Discord and say, like, first of all, join our chat, because we're having some good chats about the radiation effect and just things in general that I think you'd be interested in. But then you can ask me to update specific things on the wiki. Let's see here. Stinker says, how far have you gotten into writing the radiation effect? Right now, I'm about 2/3 of the way through. So I'm through 19 chapters. I'm thinking it's going to be about 30 to 31 chapters. We're through basically the first 2 acts. So I'm writing it in a 3-act structure, which is how most films are written. The first act kind of ends with the reveal of Emma. The second act ends with the mission in China. And now we are moving on then to the third act, where I'm not going to spoil it. But yeah, so we're about 2/3 of the way through. Right now, I'm thinking the audiobook is probably about 14 hours long. So hopefully we can get it uploaded in 2 different videos. I'm not entirely sure the length of it right now, but each chapter is about 30 to 50 minutes. What is Shane Daniels' backstory? Good question. So I will not spoil anything major about his early life backstory. The earliest thing we know about Shane is that he graduated the same year as Xander. Now this is a fun fact, and I'm not entirely sure if I want to do anything with it yet. I think it'd be fun to do something in the future with it, but I'm not entirely sure what it is yet. Shane graduated from the program. And so how the program works, right, is radiation effects typically last for about 10 years. And so you get them around 11 to 13 years old, and then we get to when you're a freshman, that's when you are initiated in the program. That's when everyone traditionally has their radiation effects for certain, and they're kind of in their strongest point. And then you serve in the program for 4 years. And then once you graduate high school, you have the option to either opt out and go to university. You need a reason to opt out, essentially. Or you stay in for another 3 years. Or, yeah, so you can opt out to go to college. You can opt out to go to the military. A lot of people do go to the military. Obviously, we see that with Jordan's mother. So with Shane, what Shane did is he went back home. He's from the Bay Area. He went to Stanford. He got a 4-year degree at Stanford done in 2 years, then went over to Afghanistan and served in Afghanistan as a member of the Marines. At some point, he found himself in a situation where he performed an act of valor, which is kind of a secret of his backstory. I'm not going to tell you guys what happened. Where when he came home, he was considered a war hero, not just to the United States. He ended up getting the Medal of Honor, but he also was kind of seen as this moral hero to the people in Tylersville. And so he comes back to Tylersville having won the Medal of Honor, having served in Afghanistan, and he joins the government, and then he becomes very, very popular, especially within the government. And as a result of this, feeling a threat from this, then Emma's dad, Bill Guerin, the prime minister who's in charge of the town, decides to take him on as his deputy prime minister, his second in command. Now Shane's only in his 20s. Shane is I think 27 or 28. He's very, very young. Like I said, he and Xander are the same age. So he kind of has this huge, bright future ahead of him, but also this very, very powerful past. And the big thing here is when Bill Guerin is talking to Emma about Shane's loyalties. And he says that we don't need to doubt Shane's loyalties because I know things about Shane that make him... Essentially, Shane owes me forever. Like, his debt to me is eternal. And so that's kind of a big secret about Shane's backstory that I think we are sitting on, and I'm excited to slowly reveal, especially with the upcoming chapters, and especially with Johnny's story having trusted in Shane and now kind of feeling like he's been betrayed by Shane and that sort of thing. So, let's see here. Stinker says, are you not reading Stephen King's It because it's too adult/graphic, because that book is very graphic, or is it too long? It's specifically the one scene. I will not give my voice to that publicly. So, Warren Kendall says, is this your only source of income? Also, are you in college by any chance? No. No to both of them. So this is not my main job. I don't make much money off of YouTube. I don't make any money on YouTube. I make as much as I do from my patrons, which would not be enough to get by. But I have a full-time gig outside of YouTube, which is why I only spend a certain amount of time on YouTube, and I don't upload things maybe as fast as you guys want me to, because I can only put in a certain amount of hours to this because of the fact that I have a full-time job outside of this. I have a family outside of this. I try to spend as much time with them as possible. My wife is generous to give me 2 hours of my afternoon every other Thursday to spend time with you guys. And so lost my train of thought for a second. So yes, no, this is not my main gig, and I'm not in college. I am older than I look, I think, for most people. I'm in my second half of my 20s now, so I have been out of college for almost 6 years now. I went to the University of St. Thomas down in St. Paul, Minnesota, and that's my education experience. Hello says, is the mind manipulation that's in the radiation effect a known thing that can happen, or is it mostly unknown by the students? I think what you're referring to is the brainwashing drug. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is something that I need to write about on the wiki. So there is a point in the series, or in the book, where Emma and her father get in such hot water with her situation and the fact that he has fabricated her backstory, which is a potentially dismissible offense to the program. It could result in his execution, because it's essentially a form of high treason. And so to prevent this, when things kind of get to their worst point, in order to prevent this, they have to manipulate the memories of people connected to what happened. And Emma mentions that she doesn't know anything about it. She doesn't know how it works. She doesn't know if it's something they eat. She doesn't know if it's like a gaseous drug that's going to last in the atmosphere for a little bit. She has no idea. This will slowly be revealed in specifically the second book. We really start to learn about that drug in the second book, and what it does, how powerful it is, how dangerous it is to use because of the fact that you also have to manipulate the situations around things. You can't just wipe people's memories. You have to manipulate the records. You have to... And the more that this is revealed, the more we reveal how active Bill Guerin has been in shaping things to his own agenda, if that makes any sense. So is it a known thing? It is to those in the government, but it's not common knowledge among the citizens. The only, I will say the only thing I think people, if people know about it or if people suspect it, the only reason is no one seems to know what banishment actually is, but people suggest it. So we meet a character in a chapter that's not out yet, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but he has been, he knows the secret of banishment from the company. So once you commit a high-level crime in the company, you are essentially banished from it or dismissed from it. And this is a thing that happens regularly enough that people are aware of it and very, not anxious about it, but very cautious to break the law because of it. And so some people suspect that you're executed, but at the same time, the government of the IREA is very conservative, and the death penalty, I mean, like they're very anti-abortion. They're very like life begins at birth, or life begins at conception rather, and ends at a natural death. Like they're very against assisted suicide, that sort of thing. And so the idea that this government then would allow execution, a lot of people think that no, it can't be execution that they're doing to these people. They're just wiping their memories and dropping them off the face of the planet, essentially. And so people suspect that that drug exists, but people don't realize how much it is used, if that makes any sense. White Squid says, I often watch your streams knowing absolutely nothing, and if you spill your drink on the laptop, you won't be able to host them. Yeah, that's why my drink is way over here and my laptop is way over here. If I spill it, it will not reach. So, you have nothing to worry about. If I went like this, no, I'm joking. Warren Kendall says, in the Percy series, how do you feel about Jason as a character? I don't like Jason. I've mentioned before that Jason feels like the version of Percy that's not allowed to swear in front of his parents. The problem with Jason, right? And I've mentioned this before. You guys who have seen my streams before, this is me repeating myself. The thing about Jason is, in order to take away Percy for a book, in order to present new protagonists and take away Percy, you can't give the audience Percy for the first book. You have to take him away and give him back. You can't pull him away, otherwise you're going to lose the audience. So what Rick Riordan had to do was create a character that is engaging enough for you to want to engage with him, but is different than Percy. And so how he did this was basically create a new Percy, but change him. And the way that he changed them is taking away all of the ways about Percy that are really fun. So Jason doesn't joke as much as Percy. Jason doesn't have the attitude that Percy does. And part of Jason also not having his memory then is you lose a lot of the personality that could be there. Jason just doesn't really have a personality, and it's very frustrating. And so him being the main character, he doesn't ever really develop in the way that we get from Percy or even from Apollo. Like, Apollo is so much fun because Apollo is a complete asshole. And it's fun. I enjoy reading Apollo. I enjoy listening to Apollo's POV because Apollo is fun to see all of the negative sides of himself just on full display. It's a lot of fun, whereas Jason doesn't have that. And so Jason bores me because of that. Expogo Sam says, I am here. I did, in fact, give up. Perfect. It's good to see you, Sam. If you have any questions, we've been talking about the radiation effect, so we went through your questions, but if you have more things that you want answered, feel free to ask about them. My camera keeps doing that. It's been flicking back and forth. That's bizarre. Might have a loose cable. Let's see here. Stinker says, if you could, what's one thing you would change about Percy Jackson or Heroes of Olympus's ending? Good question. Let me take a breath here. Excuse me. My biggest thing with the original Percy ending, I don't know that I would have set up Heroes of Olympus. I think ending Percy Jackson, when you do, without the because as soon as you give the prophecy, you know the series is going to continue, right? And I think it might be more of a shock to people, or give people more closure if you bookended it and then come back to it. But maybe not. Maybe I'm completely wrong, and it was the right choice to give the prophecy leading into Heroes of Olympus. I don't know. Percy Jackson's got a pretty good ending. Heroes of Olympus, I don't know. I don't know that I would have ended it on Nico's POV. I don't know that I like the setup with the relationship with Will and that sort of thing, but I don't like that as the ending chapters. I feel like if we had a little bit more from like Percy and Annabeth, or even like, I love Frank and Hazel, and the fact that they don't get to come back bothers me. I think Leo's ending is really solid. I really do. You could have left it ambiguous, but I really think that's a really fun ending to the series. But beyond that, I don't know. Nikita Goal says, will you be doing Lord of the Rings? Eventually. I can't put them on YouTube, but eventually they will be up for free over on Patreon and Vimeo. The Tolkien estate has a really, really, really harsh line when it comes to copyright on YouTube, especially with the stuff that we do. And so I will do The Hobbit first. Hobbit for sure is going to be over on Patreon. I can't give you a date, but yes, eventually we will do those. Hallow says, yes, I meant that situation. Thanks on the update. Warren Kendall says, are you going to read the Nico and Will book? Yes, it is this one right here, if you can see where my finger's pointing. It takes place after the Trials of Apollo, and it references very, very big spoilers for certain characters in the Trials of Apollo. And so, because of that, I think it would be inappropriate to give that to you guys prior to finishing Trials of Apollo. So as soon as we're done with Trials of Apollo, then you guys will get The Sun and the Star. Stinker says, TBH, Heroes of Olympus' ending felt too incomplete. I don't disagree. The ending to Blood of Olympus... Well, first of all, Blood of Olympus is significantly shorter than any of the other books in the series. It's the only book of all of the Heroes of Olympus books that I did in my recordings that I could have shrunk under 10 hours. And I think it would have been significantly under 10 hours. I want to say it's like 9.5, whereas all of the other ones are upwards of 10, probably closer to 11 and 12. It's very short. the ending feels very rushed. And not necessarily rushed, but like you get a lot happening very, very fast, and you don't get a huge resolve. The thing that was great about the Percy Jackson series is you get a bit of time to resolve, which is really nice. And you get several chapters after the climax where things just kind of settle down, which is really nice. So yeah, I agree. Let's see here. Flick Street Productions says, one thing I didn't like about Annabeth in The Last Olympian and Battle of the Labyrinth is her going off whenever Percy either disagrees with something she believes and doesn't apologize. I mean, I want to be careful when I say this. As someone who is married, my wife does things that are similar. And I'm not saying all women are like this by any means. But it is a very common thing, especially among women in comparison to men. And it's, I think for Annabeth, speaking as someone who didn't write her character, I think Annabeth's character, when I read moments like that, that is just her way of disagreeing and processing things. She just shuts down and has to process them. And it is kind of a negative thing when it comes to just the perceived relationship she has with Percy and the trust that Percy wants to feel he has in her. But yeah, that is a common thing that she does. Your second set, it mainly comes across as Percy's in the wrong and she never is. That's her personality, is she's always right. We see huge growth with that in Mark of Athena and House of Hades, where Annabeth acknowledges the fact that she always has to be right about things. And she comes to terms with the fact that she's not. And so we see character growth through that. And I think her being in that position and seeing where that develops gives more credence to her being like that in Last Olympian, if that makes any sense. Warren Kendall says, of all the Percy Jackson series, including King Chronicles, what was your favorite book so far and least favorite book? You can't pick the Jason book. Well, I wouldn't pick the Jason book, period, actually. I actually enjoy The Lost Hero. This is a hot take. People are going to be mad at me for this one. I prefer The Lost Hero to The Son of Neptune. That's just how I am. I don't have a real reason for it. I don't enjoy the Roman stuff the way other people do. My favorite book in the whole series is close. It's probably House of Hades, but I really want to say it's Battle of the Labyrinth. My least favorite book so far is The Hidden Oracle. I don't enjoy the plot of The Hidden Oracle. The plot feels very slow. I enjoy the characters. I enjoy the POV. I just don't enjoy it that much. But as a whole, I'd probably have to say Blood of Olympus. For the reasons that I already gave, where it's too rushed, too much happens in a very short span of time. Yeah, Warren Kendall says, over Son of Neptune. Yeah, I would. I'm sorry. I don't know why. I don't have a reason. I'm sorry. But yes, I'm sorry. I do enjoy it more than Son of Neptune, and I don't know why. But I do. But yeah, I would say my least favorite is either Sea of Monsters or Blood of Olympus. I think I'm caught up with all those questions. Sam, if you're back, I'm more than happy to answer more questions about the radiation effect, but I'm also more than happy to keep answering questions about Percy Jackson. I have more time if you guys want, but it's totally up to you guys. Or we can debate my opinions, because they're probably wrong. They're probably really wrong. I will say this. If I had to rank them objectively, like if I had to make a video where I said, here is the best, here is the definitive ranking of all of the Percy Jackson, Heroes of Olympus, Camp Half-Blood Chronicles books, I would probably still say that objectively House of Hades is the best book. But objectively, I think Son of Neptune is a better book than The Lost Hero. I personally like The Lost Hero more, and I don't have a reason why. Nikita Goal says, and the fact that there are no Percy Annabeth chapters in the Blood of Olympus, so we can't really see them deal with the PTSD from Tartarus. Is that true? I feel like I've forgotten that. I'm not doubting you. I just, for whatever reason, I have completely forgotten the fact that there are no POV characters from them. Let me, give me one sec here. I just want to trust that answer, and I don't know why I don't. But Camp Half-Blood Chronicles playlist, Blood of Olympus, Jason, Leo, Piper. Yep, you're right. Wow. That's, yeah, that would probably explain it. I wish I had more of that. I really wish I would. Because those are the characters that I love and enjoy, and that's why I enjoy reading the new books, even though, like, the new books are all over the place. The new books are objectively not up to par, but they're fun because it's dealing with the characters that I enjoy listening to, if that makes any sense. K-Star says, I had to reread The Lost Hero to enjoy it. Yeah, on first read, I would say The Lost Hero is hard for people to get through because you're going from Percy's single POV all the way into 3 new main characters that you've never met before. You don't have Percy, you hardly have Annabeth, and they go off on their own mission, and it's a completely new style of narration. That is very difficult. I would say that if you reread the series, it gets a lot better, at least in my opinion. Flick Street Productions said, did I miss something? Stinker says, I don't really like the Dark Prophecy. It feels slower than Hidden Oracle. It's been a long time since I read the Dark Prophecy, so I will let you know my opinions on that there. But yeah, Hidden Oracle I'm not enjoying that much so far in my narration. I enjoy narrating it, I really do, but the plot is really slow. The thing about Percy Jackson and Heroes of Olympus was that you get through the first act of each book, and it's like, okay, here's the mission. We're going off. Now we're off. And as soon as we're off, then you feel like you're in the story. Whereas with like the Hidden Oracle, so much of it takes place at Camp Half-Blood that I'm waiting for the good times to die down and the fun to die down and for them to actually go off and do something. And then I realized I'm halfway through the book already. And this is actually what's supposed to be happening because it's taking place at Camp Half-Blood. And I'm like, oh, well, why do I not feel like the story's progressing then? So that's, I don't know. I just am not enjoying it as much as I want to. The plot, at least. Flick Street Productions says, I didn't like the final battle in Blood of Olympus. It's too rushed. Correct. A few things I want to see are gods battling with the kids to stop Gaia and Percy killing Chrysor and Leo defeating Chione. Yeah, So, for example, I don't have it in front of me, so I can't show you guys. I have the original version of Blood of Olympus. And in the back cover, they gave like this cool little artwork thing that they tucked in the back sleeve of all of the gods fighting, or all the kids fighting with their parents. And I feel like we didn't get that in the book beyond like we got a description of it. And what I mean by that, like if you ever read Game of Thrones and also read Fire and Blood, like Fire and Blood is a summary of a lot of events happening at once. It's not a book. Like you don't get character motivations, you just get a summary of what happens. It's like reading a Wikipedia page. To me, when I read the final act of The Blood of Olympus, it feels like I'm reading the Wikipedia page of what happened. I'm not feeling like I'm with these characters or that things are happening between the characters that are cohesive in a way that the rest of the series has been, if that makes any sense. It feels like a summary, and it feels very short. And I don't know. That's my own opinion, and it seems like that is reflective of what your guys' opinions on it are too. Warren Kendall says, Chalice of the Gods and Wrath of the Triple Goddess, how do you feel about them being so short and randomly being thrown in? I enjoy them for what they are. They are a mess, narratively. But what they feel like to me, if you've ever read any of the short stories in the Demigod Files or the Demigod Diaries, these books feel like Rick Riordan had a short story idea and decided to make it into a full-length book. So they're about the same length, a little shorter, of the original Percy Jackson books. They're nowhere near the length of the Heroes of Olympus books. But it's a plot that would fit a short story that is being drawn out so that we have more time with characters that we enjoy. And I enjoy spending time with these characters. I enjoy seeing the little romance angles between Percy and Annabeth. I love seeing the almost adult friendship between Percy and Grover. I love seeing just kind of the world of mythology shrink back down from the grand scale that it used to be. I enjoy that. But the plots are all over the place and don't make a ton of sense and aren't... I like the missions of the earlier books more than... I wish that we had quests around the United States without the need of these huge, like, series arc prophecies. And I think what these 2 books, soon to be 3 books, are doing is giving us the second half of that, where we don't have these grand scale prophecies, but he's also shrinking this story back into just taking place in New York. And as someone not from New York, granted, I've been to New York, like I understand it, and it's more like a slice of life type thing, but I liked the big adventures that they went on. Just, I don't want the huge overarching end of the world type prophecies, if that makes any sense. Stinker says, the only reason I liked The Lost Hero was Leo and Piper, but later on Piper became more bland. Yeah, I like the plot. I like the plot of The Lost Hero better than Son of Neptune. I like the characters in Son of Neptune significantly more. I love Leo. Piper is an enjoyable character in the first book. But that trio is nowhere near as fun as Percy and Hazel and Frank. And their backstories aren't nearly as solid, and I just like the plot and the location and the side characters. I don't think the side characters in Son of Neptune are as fun, in my opinion. Let's see here. Nikita Goal says, I get that Percy Jackson is fundamentally made for children, but every book after House of Hades seems to ignore the Percy and Annabeth trauma entirely. I think Rick Riordan should have addressed that more. Yeah, I don't disagree. So I'll agree with your point. I'll disagree with the fact that he doesn't approach trauma, and that every book after, because of the fact that this book right here exists. The Sun and the Star is the book that takes place at the end of Trials of Apollo. Now, Trials of Apollo is still very fun and campy, but the last 3 books deal with some very, very heavy events, a significant loss, and the repercussions of that loss on significant characters. Because we don't get main character deaths in Percy Jackson, is kind of the big thing. And when we get that in Trials of Apollo, and I won't spoil anything, but when we get that in Trials of Apollo, things hit a little harder. And so you're right, we don't get the Percy Annabeth trauma, and I wish we did. But we do get it in the end of the Trials of Apollo, and we really get it in the Sun and the Star, because the whole point of the Sun and the Star is twofold. It's a story about trauma and loss, and it's also a metaphor for being gay. Obviously, it's a gay romance novel, and as someone who is not a member of the community, I can't speak for what that means for people reading it. But in terms of the trauma and the development of it, I wish we saw it with Percy and Annabeth, but we do eventually see it in the series, just not with them, if that makes any sense. Warren Kendall says, Percy's mom randomly being thrown in triple goddess and not much backstory or explanation. I don't entirely understand your question. She wasn't thrown in randomly. Percy's mom... I guess I don't really understand your question. Percy's mom appears in Chalice of the Gods because she's Percy's mom and he lives with her. So if you want to clarify your question, I might be able to answer something or even unpack your thoughts a little bit. But Percy's mom doesn't show up randomly. Percy lives with his mother. She is a side character that is essential to his life at that point in the story. Flick Street Productions says, one reason why I wanted Chione defeated by Leo and Percy killing Chrysler was because they directly opposed each other, and their final confrontation should have involved them and no one else. Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't disagree by any means. I think there was a lot of unresolved drama and tension in that book that we never really got. It felt very rushed. I didn't like it the first time I read it. I expected to like it more the second time I read it, and I really don't. I do like The Last Olympian better now that I've reread it. I didn't like The Last Olympian that much the first time I read it, and a lot of people consider it the best Percy Jackson book. I don't. I think Battle of the Labyrinth is easily the best Percy Jackson book, but I like The Last Olympian more than the first time I read it. I do apologize. I don't know Eastern characters, so I cannot pronounce your name. But can you use your voice when you're recording the Bible? That would be fun. Right now, are you asking me to do my Bible voice, or are you asking me to do my Percy Jackson voice when I read the Bible? Yeah, I mean, when I read the Bible, it's like a standard narrator voice. It's very solid. And Jesus said this, and yet, and this, that sort of thing. That's the voice I use for the Bible. I don't know if that's what you're asking, but I've said before, it's probably going to be like a 3-year project. But I just finished Luke last night, and Luke is the longest of the Gospels. And I'm very happy that I finally finished it. I'm trying to get my way. I got my way through all the really short books, and now I'm kind of trying to pump out all the really long books, and then we'll work our way through all the middle ones. So I have pretty much all of the minor prophets done. They might not be out yet on the channel. I have them on like a release schedule. But now I'm done with 3 of the 4 Gospels, and I'm really excited about that. Oh, I get what you're saying. Warren Kendall says, Percy's mom and Hecate, how they have a connection, but they never dived deep into it. Just the glasses and her running from the mansion. I just felt like it didn't need to be there at all. I don't know that I agree or disagree. We do know, this is something from the original series. We do know that Percy's mom has a gift of seeing through the mist. I think the whole point of her being connected with Hecate is to give a connection and a sympathetic side to Hecate that she doesn't have. Does it feel a little shoehorned? Maybe. But we do know that Percy's mom has this history with Greek mythology and the world, and that's why she was so drawn to Poseidon, if that makes any sense. So it didn't feel like it was out of the realm of her character, but I get what you mean where it felt like, oh, here's something about her that we never really realized. I definitely get that. Warren Kendall, I just read that one. Nikita Goal says, I think Piper actually became more interesting after Jason. Yeah, you're right. I won't go beyond that. Flick Street Productions says, in terms of pacing, Kane Chronicles runs circles around the Trials of Apollo and Heroes of Olympus. Pacing's quicker without skimping on the characters and their development and depth. Yeah. So the first time I read Kane, I had only read Kane Chronicles once before I recorded it this time. And I don't know that I ever finished The Serpent's Shadow. I think this was at the point in my life where I had kind of stopped reading books. I was getting into high school, and I just wasn't enjoying reading as much anymore. I was kind of out of I wanted more mature material, and I wasn't finding it the way that I needed to in Percy Jackson, if that makes any sense, and the Kane Chronicles and that sort of thing. Kane Chronicles is very, very good. And I don't think people realize how good the Kane Chronicles is. The pacing of it, the plot pacing, the relationship pacing is so perfect compared to Percy Jackson or Heroes of Olympus or Trials of Apollo. It's crazy. You get the entire B plot about Carter and Zia is paced perfectly. Like, when I say perfectly, I want to accent that as like, first book, Carter falls in love with a girl. At the end of the first book, he loses her. Second book, he has to find her and convince her that he's who she dreams of, kind of thing. Third book, coming out of that realization and getting the resolve in that. Same thing with Sadie. Sadie doesn't necessarily get that in the first book, but it develops into the second book, and then we get into the third book. The Kane Chronicles is paced perfectly. Like, I want to clarify how much I love the Kane Chronicles now that I've reread it and understand it better. I don't think any single installment is better than any single installment of Percy Jackson or the Heroes of Olympus. But I want to say, as a whole, the Kane Chronicles is a more cohesive series than anything Rick Riordan has ever written. That's my final say. That's what I have to. That's what I have to say on that one. Let's see here. Did you play any Harry Potter games? I'm not a big gamer. I've mentioned that before. I simply just don't have time to. Has kind of been the story of my life. Is I have so many interests and not enough time for all of them. And so I never really got into video games as a kid. I have played Hogwarts Legacy significantly. I'm definitely more into just walking around Hogwarts and finding things than actually playing the game. I don't enjoy playing video games for the plot. I would much rather play Madden to throw footballs against another team than do the entire story of my career. Same with NBA 2K, that sort of thing. Like, I don't enjoy playing video games. I enjoy the world building of video games and that sort of thing. So that's why I love Minecraft so much. Flick Street Productions says the Kane Chronicles books are long at about over 400 pages per book, but the chapters don't feel long at all. They do when you're recording them, I will say, but no, you're right. They don't. They don't feel overstretched. Especially the fact that, like, the end of the series, you get like a 24 chapter book and a 21 chapter book. It's very, very short in terms of chapter numbers. And so that's very nice. Yeah, the Kane Chronicles is... I can't believe... I know why I didn't like them the first time I read them. Because it's different. And I'm not huge into the Egyptian stuff. But now, having 15 years later from the first time I read them, having studied pacing and having studied character development and having studied just story progression, the Kane Chronicles the Kane Chronicles should be Rick Riordan's magnum opus. Like, it's obviously going to be Percy Jackson, but the Kane Chronicles should be Rick Riordan's best work, the one he's regarded best for. Let's see here. Warren Kendall says, I wish Demigods and Magicians were longer and had more adventures with Percy and Anna. Yeah, okay, so the one thing I'll say about the Kane Chronicles is I don't think the... oh, what's his name? Uncle Vinny. The Spacin. The one character who doesn't get his plot resolved, and then we go on to Demigods and Magicians. I wish that had been resolved in the third book. I think it feels like a little cheap cop-out for not resolving all the plots, and then you get it. And I completely agree. I wish there was more told from... Actually, I'll say this. I wish we got more from Sadie. We don't get a POV from Sadie, and I enjoy reading Sadie. Sadie is probably my favorite character to read for in all of Rick's works. But yeah, aside from that, yes, I wish we get more stuff from Percy and Annabeth's perspective. I wish we got more combined with the Canes. There's only 3 of them, and I wish there were more. What books do you read to your son? Good question. He's at the age now where he can ask questions, but not all of the words make sense, if that makes any sense. So, like, he'll point at things and mumble, and you'll catch about 3 or 4 words in an entire sentence, but the rest of it doesn't really make sense. But he loves making animal noises. And so he loves reading books that have farm animals in them, because he loves making cow sounds and pig sounds and horse sounds. And so I read a lot of picture books with animals in them, is kind of where we're at, because that's what he enjoys, and that's what keeps his attention. There's one book that... So I didn't grow up bilingual, and I've always wanted my kids to. And I don't know that that's a possibility, given my knowledge of second languages and my wife's knowledge of second languages. But I've been really trying to get my son to understand French and understand Norwegian. And so I've been reading him multilingual books every once in a while at night. So, like, if you guys know the book The Rainbow Fish, originally that was written in German. It's called Der Regenbogenfisch. It's written by a Swiss author, and so I have only ever read that to him in German. And so I'll read that to him in German. There are a couple bilingual Norwegian books that I've been reading to him, teaching him, like, animal names in Norwegian. But yeah. Flick Street Productions says, sorry that Kane Chronicles' future adaptation was dropped by Netflix. Another studio should take it up, and it should be an animated miniseries like Avatar: The Last Airbender and Arcane. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm kind of happy that it got canceled, because I don't want them to torture something that I now hold very dear to my heart. But it would give me a visualization on something that I enjoy. But yeah. Warren Kendall says, have you watched the Disney Plus series of Percy Jackson? How do you feel about it? I mentioned this on several live streams, and I'll try to keep my thoughts consistent. I enjoyed it. I am very worried about the future of the show, because they changed enough about it going forward that is going to change the plot significantly, and I don't think it's for the better. Now, granted, Rick Riordan made these decisions himself. He changed things that he wanted to change after having written the book himself, and so we'll see. I'm very cautiously optimistic. I enjoyed it. It felt a little too Disney for my liking. I didn't like the pacing of it. But I'm cautiously optimistic. Excuse me. Srivatsa Tatapatri says, how many languages do you speak? Fluently one. I speak English, obviously. But I have a pretty solid knowledge of Spanish. I have a pretty solid knowledge of French. I can pronounce German fairly effectively because of the fact I speak English. Then I can read Norwegian and speak it semi-conversationally would be my best guess. But I have zero understanding of Eastern languages. I have no idea how to pronounce non-Latin alphabets. I went to Montenegro once, and as soon as the alphabet switched to Cyrillic, I felt lost. Like, you go to Europe and you can find your way around because you know how to read words, but as soon as the alphabet switches, that's when it gets really confusing. So, Srivatsa Tatapatri says, do we need to know Egyptian mythology to understand Kane Chronicles, or will we catch up with the references while we're going through the book? You shouldn't. So it's kind of like Percy Jackson, right? Where it's a book that teaches you about the mythology as you read through it. It may help, but it should do a decent enough job of creating its own world out of the mythology that you don't need to know the myths to understand the story, if that makes any sense. Sarah W. says, I don't really like the changes, and I'm very wary when they make modern versions of books from 10 to 20 years. And me too. Yeah. I think we talked about this last live stream, but like everything is trying to be Harry Potter. Ever since Harry Potter, everything has tried to become Harry Potter and has failed miserably. Aragon, his Dark Materials, excuse me. City of Ember. Hunger Games was successful because Hunger Games was its own thing. Twilight was successful because Twilight was its own thing. Divergent failed. Maze Runner failed. All of these, I don't even know if Margaret Peterson Haddix ever got to the writing. They talked about making TV shows and movies out of her books, and it never went anywhere. So yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've seen everything I love killed more times than once. I survived the Percy Jackson and Avatar: The Last Airbender films, and now you guys are stuck with the TV shows. And I just want my original love for the series back. I do. Let's see here. Would you ever make a Radiation Effect film series? I don't know. Well, okay, so the answer is I've always wanted to. I think nowadays it would be more effective to make it into a TV show. If someone were ever to offer me the rights to ask for the rights to make my show into a TV, or to make my book into a TV show, part of me says yes, and I want it to succeed. And as part of that, I A, need to trust the people making it, and B, I would like to have a producership on it so that I can have a say in the creative decisions that are being made, changing my material if I think it's more effective to fit to the screen. Or I say, you guys are putting a ton of money into this. What I can do with this is walk away and take that money and do really good things with that money and put it all in your hands. And if it fails, then that's fine. Eyes are on my original product. But if it succeeds, then congrats. More eyes on my product kind of thing. So I don't know. I think the easy answer is yes. I don't think a film series would capture it the way I would want it to. The books are going to be too long, too many plots. Flick Street Productions says, have you ever heard of the Troll Hunters animated series on Netflix? I've heard of it. I've never seen it. Let's see here. Warren Kendall says, I don't like the ending where Annabeth saw Luke try to kill Percy. I don't either. That is one of my biggest gripes. I think it completely changes Annabeth's character motivations. It feels like it changed the plot because now she knows Luke is really who he really is instead of figuring it out after holding the sky. Yeah, I have said the exact same thing before. I think it completely changes Annabeth's character motivations. I think her ability to develop as a character is shifted by that, and that is something that bothers me significantly. Sarah W. says, like, there's a difference between making a TV series now rather than 2010 and early 2000s. Absolutely. There's a lot more money in TV than there used to be. Srivatsa Tatapatri says, I personally love Percy Jackson more than Harry Potter. A lot of people on my channel say that. I tend to disagree for a variety of reasons, but I don't think your opinions are invalid or incorrect. I just have my own personal experiences, and I have things that I like about literature that Harry Potter fills more than Percy Jackson does, if it makes any sense. Flick Street Productions says, if the Radiation Effect becomes a TV series, it should be only a few seasons. Those tend to work better than shows that go on forever and run dry on true story material. Yes, or, here's my thing. I would demand it to commit to a 1 season a year schedule. The reason I say that is the characters start at 14, 15 years old. And by the time you get to 7 seasons, you are having actors who, or you have characters who are 21 years old. If you only do 1 season every year and a half to 2 years, your characters are now in their late 20s, or your actors are now in their late 20s, early 30s. And I would need to have that be consistent. That would drive me crazy. Cora says, this live has lasted a very long time. Incredibly grateful. I will have to wrap it up in about 5 minutes or so here. But yes, me too. It started a little slow. We started early, and that's part of why I think it's lasting longer. But thank you very much. Warren Kendall says, of all the books you've narrated, what has been your favorite so far? I really enjoyed reading The Giver. Now, granted, I love reading. I love The Giver as a book. The Giver is a book that I will always say is better as a single book. I think the series killed it. There are 4 Giver books, and I don't think they do the original justice like they do. I really enjoyed reading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. You can find all my Harry Potter recordings over on Patreon and Vimeo. They're free. You don't have to sign up for anything. They're available with the description below. But I really enjoyed Goblet of Fire. I really enjoyed Half-Blood Prince because Half-Blood Prince is my favorite book. But like I said, Goblet of Fire is where I felt like I came into my own as a narrator and enjoyed the experience. Trying to think what else. I really enjoyed reading the Spiderwick Chronicles too. That's another one that's not available on YouTube. But it's a lot of the time it's which books didn't I enjoy. I really I love the books. I don't enjoy reading them is often the case. These books are very hard to get through as a narrator. They're very, very just tedious and a lot of thought-heavy processes, and I don't enjoy them that much. Same with Dune. Dune is very hard to read as a narrator, but I enjoy Dune as a book. So it's something that I'm willing to sacrifice my boredom for 2 months in order to eventually go back to these recordings in 2 years and listen to the book myself and be proud of the fact that I did it and enjoy the book because it's an enjoyable book. But remember that when I was narrating this, I was bored to death and dreading every night where I have to record a chapter or 2. Flick Street Productions says one more thing. Having the radiation effect be animated could work better than live action. The characters would age, but the characters would not change hugely if you didn't want them to. You're right. I hesitate with that. Here's why I hesitate with that. I grew up in a period where animation was not as... When I was young, animation was not taken seriously. Animation... Like, occasionally you get really, really solid shows out of animation. It's a rarity, or it was a rarity. Avatar: The Last Airbender was kind of one of those that just popped up out of nowhere. But one thing animation relies on, often, very often, because of its nature, is it relies on comedy. There are small moments of comedy in the radiation effect. I don't know that it, like... I'm hesitant to say yes to an animated series of my TV show, or of my book as a TV show, because of the fact that I think it changes the way that people see it. And I think the whole point of the series for me, the reason I'm writing it, is so that you can see what politics and decision making and faith in systems does to real people, despite the situations that surround these people. It's obviously a supernatural world that they live in, but all of the character motivations and all of the storylines and all of their feelings are rooted in very real things. And I would want that to come across to a viewer, and I don't know that you get that as an animated thing. So that would be my hesitation with that, if that makes any sense. Warren Kendall says, do you know why YouTube took down all your recordings randomly? I know you've probably said in past streams, it was just curious. That's what made me find your Patreon. It wasn't randomly. It was what YouTube... So what we do is defensible under fair use copyright because of the size of our audience. But YouTube's copyright policies protect the holders of the copyright rather than users who use the copyright. And what that means is, regardless of what we're doing on the channel, if someone makes a claim on it, regardless of whether or not we can fight that in court, YouTube has the ability to shut us down without defense because of the claim. And so Harry Potter came after us very, very hard one time, and we lost all, because of the fact that we had so many Harry Potter videos, we lost everything. We lost the whole channel, because as soon as you get 3 copyright strikes, your channel is done, regardless of whether or not you can defend it. And so because of that, we moved all of that material, all of our other material that has been claimed at some point, over on Patreon and Vimeo for free, and then restarted the channel. Like I said, we have 2 separate channels. One does full recordings and one does daily chapters, just to kind of separate things and make it less likely that can ever happen again, if that makes any sense. Srivatsa Tadapatri says, genuine question, do you actually read a book 2 to 3 times before doing the recording? Because you seem to have a command on what comes next. I want to know if you change tones on the go. Or did you read the book before and you make notes on how to read the lines that are forthcoming? No. I usually read things cold. So the benefit that I have of having read a lot of these books before is I know what's coming. But there are books, such as the new Percy Jackson books, that I had not read prior to recording them. If there is something that I read through that I don't feel like I give the correct emotion to, I will go back to the start of the paragraph and redo it. But I simply don't have the time to read all of these books before I record them, or take notes before I record them. And so I do read most of these books cold. A few more questions, then I do have to go. I can hear my wife and my son are back upstairs, so we should probably have dinner soon together. Flick Street Productions says, have you ever heard of the Left Behind books by Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins? It's basically a dramatization of the Bible, Book of Revelation. It's one series I really like. I've never read it before. I've never heard of it, actually. I'll check it out and let you know if that's something I'd be interested in reading. Revelation is a very interesting book. A lot of people fear Revelation because of the imagery in it. And as a Christian, and someone who has, studied the Bible most of my life, I don't think that what is in Revelation should be seen as scary, and I don't think it's something that we should fear and avoid. It's something that we should understand the meaning of better. And I mean, I'm getting into a theological debate that you guys probably don't want to get into, which is completely fine. But Revelation is not something that we should fear. Warren Kendall says, when do you think you'll finish all of the Apollo series? I think it'll be done on Patreon probably March-ish, and then finished on YouTube end of April, early May is when that'll happen. So it'll start in December and probably go... it's currently up on Patreon, but starting on the channel in December, and it'll probably be done about 5 months later. It'll be about a month or so for each book. Cora says, do you ever take a break? Never in my life. No. I should take a break every once in a while, but I have committed to something for my patrons, and as much as I may regret it sometimes, I enjoy the community that we've built, and I am happy to oblige to what you guys have asked me to do. So, as long as I can do it, I'll be happy to do it. With that, I think I'm going to call it a break. If there's any questions you guys have that I have not answered, and I don't get to them in the live stream, feel free to drop them in the comments section below. And I will try to get to them next live stream. I'll answer one more that popped up. Srivatsa Tadapatri says, you said you don't have time, so you work a job, or is YouTube and Patreon your source of income? It's not. I don't make any money on YouTube. I make a non-livable income on Patreon. It's just kind of extra money that I make from you guys over on Patreon. which allows me to do additional things in my free time, which is very nice. But I do have a main job outside of YouTube, and so that's why I can only allow a certain amount of hours per week for you guys on YouTube, because of the fact that I do work full time, and also the fact that I have a wife and a son and a family and things that I need to do outside of this. So with that, feel free to keep asking questions in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time. Go check out the links below. Like I said, all of the stuff that's not on YouTube is available on Patreon and Vimeo for free. You're more than welcome to give me money if you want to, but that should never be, I will never hide anything from you guys that won't eventually be up for free on the channel. So otherwise, there's links to the wiki too, Radiation Effect. Join the Discord and we can talk about the book too. Would be more than happy to